Hello everyone, welcome back to the Genomics Bootcamp. In this video, we continue to talk about the report of the WHO Expert Advisory Committee on developing global standards for governance and oversight on human genome editing. We will look at a very interesting part of the framework for governance document. As you see here in part 3, there are 5 special challenges that the committee has identified, and we will be looking at right now at the very interesting one, or at least from my perspective, number 5, special challenges enhancement. And in this case, it means human enhancement via gene or genome editing. The framework of the video is similar as it was before. So there is this document, we will be reading it. Some parts are highlighted, but anyway, so we'll read the full text to get the entire context, and there will be some commentaries and comments from me. I'm also very interested in your opinion on the subject, so please let me know in the comments below. I also put the link for the full document in the description of this video, and you find this section at page 26. I selected to look at this part in detail first because just frankly, it was the most intriguing for me. If I may mention some popular culture references, the movie Gattaca was the one coming to my mind, really the first one when I saw the whole report and in particular this section. Anyway, so it's a good movie, so I suggest you to watch it if you have the opportunity. But for now, we start and go forward with this section, which is a really small one or short one, but packed with very interesting information or concepts. So let's go 3.5 special challenges enhancement. At some time in the future, somatic human genome editing might be able to be used to improve typical and perfectly adequate traits or to add new traits. The potential harms and benefits to individuals seeking enhancement will vary depending on a number of scientific, ethical, personal, societal, and legal factors. Furthermore, at some future time, it might be suggested that heritable human genome editing could be used to reduce the number of people born with so-called undesirable traits or increase the number of born with improved and possibly new so-called desirable traits. Now, this is the, the plot of the movie I was talking about. Quite interesting. Also, there is a quite important and heavy question that who decides what is desirable and what is undesirable. So we have a strong ethical and moral questions hanging out right off the bat, well, in the first paragraph of this section. So continue reading the text. Again, the potential harms and benefits will vary depending on a number of scientific, ethical, personal, societal, and legal factors. But in this instance, the potential harms and benefits will need to be assessed from the perspectives of the individuals who may be born of genetically altered embryos, their prospective parents, society, and any children in subsequent generations who could inherit the genetic alternation. Good governance needs to explicitly consider whether the use of human genome editing technologies for enhancement purposes should be permitted. At minimum, this should include the assessment of the potential harms and benefits referred to here, but it need not to be limited to these factors. Okay, here is a small comment. So this text says, or basically puts into the question whether human genome editing technologies for enhancements should be permitted. But as I mentioned also in other videos, from the other parts of the text, I feel that it's basically preparing the ground for it. So we get a bit of a conflicting messages here, although I would mention that none of these messages are really clear or straightforward. But as I said, one part of the text is seems to be very towards permitting gene editing or genome editing, and here it puts it into the question. Of course, it could be that the genome editing is permitted for some purposes, for example, treatment, and not permitted for other purposes such as human enhancement. But we are speaking about the same technology, so you cannot have one and deny the other. So an interesting dilemma for sure. So we continue with number 53 that says the possibility that human genome editing might be used for the enhancement of human traits is very controversial. One concern is that permitting human enhancement could aggravate existing social or economic inequalities. Governance decisions about the permissibility or impermissibility of using human genome editing for enhancement purposes, therefore, should be subject to inclusive and transparent societal debate. So here I would just add a short note that I do not really believe that the societal debate will lead anywhere, because I don't think a clear consensus could be reached with this heavy ethical, moral implications and a lot of money that at the end will float in this business. My case in point would be the climate change, where we as a society, we still cannot move into a unified direction. If that is not possible, I don't see chance of the society coming together on the question of the human genome editing for enhancement. I hope I'm wrong, but this is my current state of mind. Okay, so we continue. So such debate might include attention to the full range of temporary and permanent medical and biological enhancements already in use, ranging from nutritional supplements to strength-enhancing steroids to cosmetic surgeries, which often have varying and sometimes inconsistent policies about ethical, societal, and legal acceptability. So you see that there is a lot of possibilities on the plate. Also, just an interesting personal note, when I was reading this section the very first time, when I read strength enhancing steroids, my first thought was military use, question mark. And yes, also military use, which is then further underlined in this very report. So we go on to a very interesting part 53, which says societal concerns about human enhancement may differ depending on the context. For example, perceptions of potential harms and benefits may be very different if the proposed enhancement aims to improve performance in sport or academic endeavors, as contrasted with efforts to improve military prowess or aptitude for space missions. Here I question a little bit the underlying question. I don't see why there would be differences in the perception of the human genome editing for enhancement between sports, for example, sports and military use. The underlying question is, are we allowed to change the human population, to improve it? So we continue with the text. Good governance should be flexible enough to evaluate proposed enhancement in different contexts, taking into account the possibility that enhanced individuals might be elite athletes or enhanced fighters could change careers. Here again, I don't know why the career change would be such an issue. I think there are much more serious questions in this sentence, or basically the sentence brings up much more serious questions. Well, at the one part, there is the integrity of the sports, if the report mentions elite athletes specifically. The interesting part about genome editing is once the editing is done, the part of the genome is indistinguishable from a normal human genome, because it in fact is a normal genome, because the edit was done on the human genome, so we did not introduce any specific elements from outside. Either the edit was on the gene itself, so it's just another allele, other variant of the gene, or if there was a gene transfer from one human to this other one, then also we still talk about human genes. So we cannot detect or cannot distinguish sometime in the future the gene edited athlete and the normal or non-edited human being, which then brings up some questions of the fairness of basically all the sports. Or we need to redefine what fair is. The other interesting part for me is how this framework for governance keeps pushing on the military use of the human genome editing. And don't get me wrong, I agree with the authors that this is one of the most obvious uses of the technology. But at the same time, I am just surprised how straightforward and plainly it is written in the text, because usually in this text for given out by these large international organizations, the wording is very careful. So it cannot be misunderstood or interpreted various ways. And in fact, also this text is also careful in phrasing in many ways, but the possibility of the military use of the human genome editing is written out straightforward and plain in multiple parts of the text. And of course, the whole thing makes quite sense because, well, the military in general tends to have the required amount of secrecy on its military basis. It tends to have the required amount of funding because we know that the budgets of the military are usually the highest one within countries. And the military also has the motivation when it comes to defense of the countries or the perceived need to defend against a perceived enemy. And here I'm not thinking about any specific country or a specific country's military. I basically think about all militaries of all the major countries. Okay, so this paragraph ends again with a sentence which basically says that the human genome editing might or might not be allowed. So the sentence is, governance decisions about the permissibility or impermissibility of human genome editing for enhancement purposes should therefore take into account dual use dilemmas. This part continues with strengthening oversight measures for human genome editing for enhancement. So point 55, when strengthening oversight measures, the following questions should be considered, other than questions might arise also with time. Okay, so A, will human genome editing for enhancement purposes be permitted? If not permitted, what are the penalties, civil and criminal, and how will violators be identified? For example, the mechanisms available that allow individuals or institutions to report such violations. Number two, if not permitted, can the researcher or clinician conduct the work in another jurisdiction where it is explicitly permitted without fear of civil or criminal penalty in the jurisdiction where they typically work? What if there is limited or no oversight in the jurisdiction where the researcher or clinician intends to work? So this point raises a huge question, because it can be that human genome editing is explicitly forbidden in one country, but could be explicitly allowed in other country. Then, of course, everybody who wants to do such a research will go to country where it's permitted or where the regulations are very relaxed. And because all the countries are autonomous, and I don't think that really all countries in the world will forbid the use of genome editing, then basically it is no way to legally stop the genome editing from happening. Number three, for point A, is if permitted, will human genome editing for enhancement fit within existing oversight measures? If using existing oversight measures, do they need specific amendment or cover the range of research and practice? Here again, well, I don't think that the existing legislation is enough, and because of the wide variety of use of human genome editing for sure. Very specific rules will be needed. Point B here reminds us that the human genome editing could be used in a wide variety of very beneficial ways, but this also raises some questions. So how will distinctions be drawn between the disease and disability prevention and therapy? How will enhancement be defined? For example, will this be the introduction of traits that are beyond ordinary human capacity and health? Or will this be the introduction of traits beyond those usually present in the human species? Well, this point raises some quite interesting questions. For example, if we introduce a resistance to malaria, then is this considered an enhancement of a person, or just kind of a treatment? Well, not really a treatment, but a medical procedure of some sorts that clearly is beneficial for that person or for the people? What if we introduce some changes that prolong people's lifetime? Again, is this an enhancement, or is this something that we can do or should do because the technology is available and it is just common sense to do it? As I said many times now in these videos, we have a large number of new questions, and the answers to these questions are not clear at all. And the last point in this part is letter C. Real questions of equitable access to research participation, as well as safe and effective treatment across domestic populations and communities, affect whether an individual will be able to use such editing for personal enhancement. Again, this is a question that comes back a few times in this report, and basically it asks, if everything is permitted and everything is in common use, will everybody have the same access to it? Could everybody reap its benefits, or it will be a privilege of certain groups or countries? This is certainly a question to think about. And we are already at the end of this relatively short but extremely interesting section on use of human genome editing for enhancements. If you are interested about this topic, don't forget to leave your comment below and give me your opinion on the matter. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe so I see that, well, there is an interest in this video, so then I will follow up with more videos like this. For today, I thank you for your time and have a very nice day.